Hello and welcome to the Bankers Tech Talk video series looking at all things fintech. We're now in our 6th year of the series and you can watch all previous episodes on thebanker.com/tech talks. I'm Joy Macknight, Managing Editor at The Banker, and I'm joined by Avtar Singh, who's CEO of Nivaura, which delivers capital markets automation solutions. Avtar, thanks so much for joining me today.
Hi, Joy. It's very nice to be here.
So can you give us a little bit of background and talk about how, or the reasons behind why capital markets have been slow to digitalize?
Sure. So there's three key reasons, and I always like to call them the three C's: commercial, complexity, and communication. I mean, from a commercial perspective, as we saw in the last financial crisis, the cost of compliance, went through the roof, and all the systems and the inefficiencies along the value chain of executing trades. These costs all coupled together uh, has actually had a huge impact on the fees. So the commercial aspect is a key driver for this change. Before this, the fees were quite high, so the drivers for change weren't really there. Secondly, the complexity of these kinds of transactions of like, multiple parties and around multiple systems and stakeholders is also quite significant. But obviously, before the crisis, as the fees were high, there wasn't really a driver to change. Everybody sort of accepted the complexity as it was. And then finally, in terms of communication, this is all related to managing unstructured data, even for secondary trading. When trades are executed through a Bloomberg Messenger or uh, voice trades, that's a huge amount of unstructured data. How do you take that and how do you structure it into rows and columns that can actually go into other systems? For primary markets, that's even more complex when you have complex legal documentation that has to be coupled together, constructed, and then all of that data has to feed into a number of systems and be sent to other stakeholders. So all of these complexities coupled together and challenges has resulted in a very a slow and a long change process.
Can we dive a little bit deeper into some of the issues at that systems level?
One of the most interesting is, if you look at all the three things around commercial complexity and communication, and if you focus on primary markets, because that's the area that we're really targeting, if you look at the value chain from front to back, it all starts with the legal documentation. Ultimately, when the dealers are mandated on a transaction, that sort of happens on a communication tool like Bloomberg, and then from that, they start communicating and structuring a term sheet. They start like actually inputting a lot of information uh, into Word documents. These are structured and then they're sent around to multiple parties. Things are agreed. And then ultimately, that also requires like input of information into Excel sheets for pricing, etc. So it's a huge amount of information that's sent across around email, voice, or lab messenger. Then after that's been agreed, you take the information in the a term sheet. Then you have to actually input that, send that over to the legal team, and then they then take that, type that into a legal document that then needs to be shared again with a lot of parties and agreed, finally sent to a number of parties to be signed. Then once they're signed, you've got now a legal document where the information that was agreed and plugged into that document, that has to be now extracted and actually typed into other systems across multiple stakeholders. So as you can imagine, that level of complexity is huge, not just because it's happening across a number of systems, but it's also happening across a number of organizations.
So what is the solution and how do you see the future of the capital markets?
Fundamentally, like we've always saw the problem as a data standards problem. If you look at the 90s, when the connectivity between the sell side and the buy side, the revolutionary change was the fixed
Mm.
protocol. Before that, outside of financial services, what was the driver that led to the internet to explode and become this huge commercial success? Because the internet existed from the 70s, but it was the late 80s when a standard way of actually interacting with the internet became easier. So any party can present information, and it can be seen as intended and interacted with as intended. That was the World Wide Web. That's essentially data standards, HTML, HTTP. We need some similar form of structure for primary markets, where the structure of the data in the legal document is in a form that can feed straight through the entire value chain from front to back. That level of standardization is key to drive real sustainable change in this industry.
And so, how is Nivaura sort of helping to create that future?
So while we are focusing on developing a flexible automation tool that any party can deploy to uh, digitalize and automate their processes on how they interact internally and how they interact with various data sources, like either structured or unstructured, one of the key things that we've been driving is an industry-wide change on the data standards. We started this journey around 4 years ago now with the likes of Ellen and Overy and Linklaters, and working with other law firms as well, like Clifford Chance and Latham's, ultimately because that's where the golden source of the data is. Things are agreed and structured in the documentation, and then that data then flows through all the way through the value chain. So we are working with organizations like these and some of the clearing systems as well across the world, and exchanges. As we are working very closely with the likes of the London Stock Exchange, and then a number of other global exchanges. And ultimately, what we're talking about is saying, if the data is agreed and structured in the legal documents, and there's a certain taxonomy and syntax that is used for that data, and everybody agrees to that syntax and taxonomy, they can take that data feed and flow it throughout the whole system. And just to be very clear, we are not saying this is a Nivaura standard. This is an industry-wide standard.
Excellent. Thank you so much for your insights, Avtar.
Thank you, Joe.